This is the story of a neighborhood in ancient Rome, a crossroads where a cobbler, a midwife, a cook, and a stranger from the north live out their everyday lives in the greatest city the world has ever known. And this city has stood for 800 years. It sprawls across 7 hills and the valleys between them, and on this night, a night in the late summer of the year we would call 112, it is home to more than 1,000,000 souls. Rome, the eternal city, the center of an empire that stretches from the gray seas of Britain to the sun-baked sands of Egypt, from the forests of Germania to the shores of the Black Sea, and somewhere within its vastness, in a neighborhood tucked between the lower slope of the Esquiline Hill and the edge of the old Subura district, a street is beginning to wake. It is not yet dawn. The stars are still faintly visible above the rooftops, though the eastern sky has begun to soften from black to the deep blue that comes just before first light. The air is warm. It has been a hot August, and even at this hour the stones still hold yesterday's heat. But there is a faint stirring now, a coolness moving through the narrow streets, as if the city itself is drawing a slow breath before the day begins. Listen, and you can hear it. The creak of wooden wheels on stone, delivery carts making their way through the streets while the law still permits them, hauling amphorae of wine and olive oil, sacks of grain, baskets of figs and onions from the countryside. Rome has forbidden wheeled traffic during daylight hours since the time of Julius Caesar, and so the city feeds itself in darkness, a great restless commerce that moves through the streets like blood through veins while the people sleep. The carts will be gone by sunrise. But for now, they rattle and groan through the alleys, and the drivers call to their mules in low voices, and the sound is as much a part of Roman night as the crickets and the distant bark of dogs. At the corner where 2 streets meet, there is a small shrine built into the wall. It is modest, a little stone alcove, no taller than a man's chest, with a painted image of 2 figures inside. The lares compitales, the guardian spirits of the crossroads. Someone has placed a garland of dried flowers at their feet. A small clay oil lamp flickers in front of them, its flame bending in the barely perceptible breeze. Every neighborhood in Rome has a shrine like this one, tended by the people who live nearest to it, and it is the quiet heart of the crossroads, the place where the neighborhood becomes, in some small way, sacred. And just beside the shrine a door opens. The woman who steps out is perhaps 65, perhaps older. It is hard to say because her movements are quick and purposeful, and her eyes, even in the near dark, are sharp. Her name is Serapia, and she has been opening this door at this hour for more than 30 years. She was born in Alexandria, in the Egyptian province, and she came to Rome as a young bride with her husband Cahotep, who opened this thermopolium, this hot food counter, in the year that Vespasian became emperor. Cahotep has been dead for 11 years now. Serapia has run the place alone ever since, and she runs it well. She moves through the small space with the efficiency of long practice. The thermopolium is a single room, open to the street through a wide stone counter fitted with round openings where the cooking pots sit. The pots are empty now, scrubbed clean the night before. Serapia lights the charcoal in the firebox beneath the counter, blowing gently until the embers catch and glow, and in the dim red light, her face is steady and focused. She fills the first pot with water from a jug, adds lentils and a handful of dried herbs, and sets it over the heat. By the time the neighborhood wakes, there will be lentil soup, warm bread from the bakery 2 streets over, and cheap wine mixed with water and honey. This is breakfast for working people, and Serapia has served it 10,000 times. But before she does anything else, before the lentils, before the bread, before the first customer arrives, she steps outside and tends the shrine. She trims the lamp wick. She brushes a leaf from the alcove. She stands for a moment with her hand resting on the warm stone, and her lips move, though no sound comes out. It is a habit so old it has become part of her body, like breathing. She has tended this shrine since before most of the current neighbors were born. She tended it when the neighborhood was different, when the faces were other faces, when the man she loved was still alive. The shrine remains, the lamp still burns, and Serapia still lights it. Across the narrow street another door is already open. The smell of leather and wax drifts out into the pre-dawn air, and from inside comes the sound of a man working, the quiet tap of a hammer on a last, the rasp of a knife trimming a sole. This is the cobbler's shop, and the man inside is Lucius. He is 52 years old, with broad, scarred hands and a face that has settled into an expression of patient attention, the kind of face that makes people want to sit down and talk. He was born a slave in a household near the Forum, the son of a Greek-speaking mother who worked in the kitchen. He was freed at 23. His master, a reasonable man, had rewarded years of good work with manumission, and Lucius had used his small savings to apprentice himself to a cobbler. He learned the trade. He rented this shop. He married. His wife died of a fever when their son was 7. He raised the boy alone, and the boy grew up in this shop, playing among the leather scraps, falling asleep to the sound of his father's tools. The boy is 23 now. His name is Decimus, and he sleeps upstairs in the room they share above the shop, though not for much longer. On Lucius's workbench, among the half-finished sandals and the jars of oil and dye, there is a pair of boots. They are traveling boots, caligae, with thick soles and strong hobnails, built for roads, built for distance. Lucius has been working on them for weeks, and they are nearly done. The leather is the best he could afford, supple and well oiled, and the stitching is as fine as anything he has ever made. He has put into these boots everything he knows about his craft, every small skill accumulated over 25 years of shaping leather to fit the human foot. They are, quietly, a masterpiece. They are for Decimus. His son has taken a position with a merchant company that trades in the eastern provinces, Syria perhaps, or Asia Minor, and he will leave before autumn. He will walk out of this shop and up the street and through the city gate and onto one of the great roads that lead away from Rome, and he will be wearing the boots his father made him. Lucius holds one of the boots up to the lamp. He turns it slowly, checking the sole, testing the flex of the ankle. His face, in the lamplight, is impossible to read. He sets the boot down. He picks up another piece of work, a customer's sandal that needs a new strap, and he begins. Outside, the sky is turning pale. The carts are thinning. A rooster crows somewhere on the hill above, and then another farther away. The smell of charcoal smoke and lentils drifts from Serapia's counter, mixing with the leather smell from Lucius's shop, and somewhere a shutter opens, and a woman's voice calls down to the street and the neighborhood. This small, worn, ordinary place at the crossroads of 2 unremarkable streets in the greatest city the world has ever known begins another day. Let us follow Thesala. She is already awake. She has been awake since before Serapia's door opened, lying in the dark of her third-floor rooms, listening to the building settle and creak around her. The insula is 5 stories tall, brick and timber and concrete, and it makes sounds at night like a living thing. The groan of beams, the murmur of voices through thin walls, the occasional sharp cry of an infant 2 floors above. Thesala knows these sounds the way a sailor knows the sounds of a ship. She has lived here for 9 years. She rises, washes her face from a basin of water she carried up the stairs the evening before. There is no running water above the ground floor, and the daily carry is something her arms have long since stopped complaining about, and dresses simply. A tunic of undyed wool, a belt, sandals. She ties her dark hair back. On a shelf beside her bed, arranged with careful precision, are the tools of her work: bronze probes and hooks, clean linen strips rolled tight, small clay pots sealed with wax and labeled in her own hand: pennyroyal, rue, fenugreek, honey and vinegar, white poppy, each one a knowledge passed down through generations of women who understood the body and its needs long before any man wrote a treatise on the subject. Thesala is a midwife. She was trained by an older woman in Thessaloniki, her home city, who had been trained by the woman before her, a chain of knowledge reaching back further than anyone could trace. When she came to Rome after her husband's death, following a cousin's suggestion, seeking work in a bigger city, she brought that knowledge with her, and it has sustained her ever since. She is good at what she does. She is, in fact, exceptional at what she does, though she would not use that word herself. This morning she has been sent for. A woman named Prisca, who lives 3 streets away in a slightly better insula, one with a shared courtyard and a functioning latrine, has recently given birth to her 2nd child, and the birth was difficult. Thesala attended the delivery 4 days ago. She is returning now to check on mother and child. She descends the stairs, each flight narrower and darker than the one below, the plaster walls stained with smoke and dampened by the condensation that never quite dries in these buildings, and emerges into the morning street. The light is golden now, the sun clearing the rooftops, and the neighborhood is fully awake. She passes Lucius's shop and nods to him through the open doorway. She passes Serapia's counter, where 2 laborers are already eating hunched over their bowls, and Serapia catches her eye and tilts her head. A question, an offering, and Thesala shakes her head gently. Later, she has work first. At Prisca's building, she climbs to the 2nd floor and knocks. The door opens to a small warm room that smells of milk and sweat and the faintly sweet scent of the herb-infused oil Thesala left on her last visit. Prisca is sitting up on the bed, the baby at her breast. She looks tired, but her color is better. The older child, a boy of 3, is sitting on the floor playing with a wooden horse. Thesala works quietly. She checks the baby, his breathing, his color, the stump of the cord, which is drying well. She examines Prisca, feeling her abdomen with practiced hands, asking simple questions in a voice that is calm and unhurried. She changes the linen compress she had placed days before, applies fresh oil, and mixes a drink of honey, fenugreek, and warm water to help Prisca's milk come in more fully. Everything she does, she has done 100 times. Her hands move with a certainty that comes not from thinking, but from knowing, the deep bodily knowledge of a craft practiced so long it has become instinct. Prisca thanks her. She offers payment, a few small coins and a piece of dried fish, and Thessala accepts with a nod. There is no negotiation, the fee is fair, and both of them know it. Thessala touches the baby's head once, lightly, and leaves. Outside, the street is busier now. She makes her way back to the crossroads, and this time when Serapia tilts her head, Thessala sits. She eats a bowl of lentils with bread and drinks a cup of watered wine, and for a few minutes she is still. Serapia does not ask about the birth. She does not need to. She has known Thessala long enough to read the answer in the way she eats. Unhurried, the tension gone from her shoulders. It went well. They sit in a companionable quiet, two women who have known each other for nearly a decade, while the morning moves around them. A man comes to the counter and Serapia serves him without breaking the silence. A cat crosses the street and disappears under a cart. The sun climbs higher. Thessala finishes eating and returns to her rooms. The rest of her morning is her own. No one else is sent for her today, though that can change at any moment. She spends it sorting her herbs, grinding dried pennyroyal in a small stone mortar, checking her stores. The room smells green and sharp, like a garden concentrated into a single space. She works with the same unhurried precision she brought to Prisca's bedside, and there is a kind of contentment in it. The satisfaction of useful work, of order, of things in their place. And yet, if you could watch her closely, and in this story you can, you might notice that the contentment has a particular quality to it. It is the contentment of a person who has made herself entirely necessary and, in doing so, has made herself entirely known by what she does rather than who she is. Thessala the midwife, Thessala the healer, Thessala who knows what to do. She has built a life that is shaped entirely around other people's needs, and it fits her so well that she has almost forgotten there might be any other shape a life could take. Almost. The young man standing at the mouth of the street has been in Rome for 3 days, and he has not yet stopped being astonished. His name is Marin, and he comes from Colonia Agrippina, the city on the Rhine that the Romans built and the locals have made their own. It is a real city, Colonia. It has forums and temples and bathhouses and a bridge across the river. Marin grew up thinking it was vast. He understands now that it was a village. Rome is not a city. Rome is a world compressed into a space barely large enough to hold it. In 3 days he has walked until his feet blistered, and he has not seen the same street twice. He has stood in the Forum of Trajan and looked up at the great columns spiraling with carved figures, soldiers, horses, boats, battles, and felt something he could not name, a mixture of awe and smallness that made his chest tight. He has been jostled by crowds so dense that movement became a kind of negotiation, each step requiring the agreement of the bodies around him. He has smelled things he cannot identify, spices, smoke, perfumes, sewage, roasting meat, fresh bread, the sharp tang of the fulleries, all layered on top of one another in a way that makes the air itself feel thick with life. He is 22. He is strong. He has worked with his hands since boyhood, helping his uncle with construction and repair in Colonia. And he is not stupid. He carries a letter of introduction from a family friend to a building contractor named Publius Varro, who manages projects in the city. The letter says that Marin is reliable and willing to work. It does not say that Marin left Colonia because the life he could see in front of him there, the same work, the same streets, the same faces, year after year until he became his uncle, frightened him more than the unknown. He finds the street, he finds the insula. He speaks to the building manager, a sharp-eyed freedman named Owlus who looks him up and down and quotes a rent that makes Marin's savings feel suddenly fragile, and he is shown to a room on the fourth floor. It is small. The walls are bare plaster, cracked in one corner. The window is a narrow opening with a wooden shutter, and through it he can see the rooftops of the neighborhood stretching away in a jumble of tile and timber, and beyond them, somewhere in the haze, the great bulk of the Colosseum catching the afternoon sun. The room is hot. The building smells of cooked food and bodies and the faint mineral scent that carry water to the ground floor shops. From somewhere below, he can hear a woman singing, a melody he does not recognize, in a language he thinks might be Greek. From the street, the endless sound of voices, footsteps, the clatter of commerce. He sits on the thin mattress. He looks at the room. This is where he lives now. By evening, hunger drives him downstairs and out into the street. The neighborhood is different at this hour. The fierce afternoon heat has broken, and people have emerged from their rooms to gather in doorways and at counters, and the street has the feeling of a common room, a shared space that belongs to everyone and no one. Marin follows the smell of food to the thermopolium at the crossroads, where an older woman with a lined face and quick, dark eyes is ladling soup into bowls and exchanging words with customers in a voice that carries across the street without ever seeming to rise. Serapia sees him immediately. She sees everything that happens at her crossroads. She has been watching this intersection for 3 decades, and very little escapes her. She sees a young man, fair-haired, broad-shouldered, standing at the edge of the counter with the particular uncertainty of someone who is not sure of the customs here. She sees the calluses on his hands, a worker, not a scholar, and the travel dust still on his tunic. She sees that he is hungry and trying not to look lost. She serves him without comment, lentils, bread, a cup of wine. She tells him the price. He pays. He eats standing at the counter, the way the other customers do, and the food is simple and hot and good, and for the first time in 3 days the knot in his stomach loosens slightly. Across the street, in the lamplight of the cobbler's shop, Lucius is working late. He glances up and sees the unfamiliar figure at Serapia's counter. New face. The neighborhood notices these things. He returns to his work. The traveling boots, always the traveling boots, and the evening settles around them all like a warm hand. Marin presents his letter to Publius Varro on a morning in early September at a yard near the river where construction materials are stored and organized. Varro is a broad man in his 40s with the weathered hands of someone who started as a laborer and worked his way up to managing projects. He reads the letter, looks at Marin's hands, asks him 3 questions about what he has done and what he knows, and hires him on the spot. Labor is always needed. Rome is always building. And so Marin enters the great machinery of Roman construction. Picture it, a building site in the heart of the city, not far from the massive complex of Trajan's Forum that was completed only a few years ago. Scaffolding of timber rises along a half-finished wall. Men move along it in organized lines, passing bricks upward hand to hand in a rhythm that looks almost like a dance. On the ground, other men are mixing concrete, the Roman concrete that will outlast the empire itself. a combination of volcanic ash, lime, and rubble that sets harder than stone and can be shaped to any form. The sound of it is constant, the scrape of shovels, the thud of material being poured, the tap of masons setting brick into mortar with a precision that requires no measuring tools, only the trained eye and the steady hand. Marin works at the base of this hierarchy. He hauls, he carries, he mixes mortar under the direction of a foreman who communicates mostly in gestures and short, sharp commands. The work is brutal in the September heat. The sun reflects off the pale concrete, and the dust gets into everything: his eyes, his lungs, the creases of his skin. By midday his shoulders ache and his hands are raw, though they toughen quickly. He is not the only provincial on the crew. There are men from Gaul, from Hispania, from Africa, from places he has never heard of, and communication is a patchwork of rough Latin and gesture and the universal language of physical labor. You learn fast or you slow everyone down, and the crew does not have patience for slow. But Marin watches. This is his nature. He has always been the one who observes before he speaks, who takes in the shape of a situation before acting, and what he sees when he lifts his eyes from his own labor is something remarkable. He sees the logic of the building revealing itself, the way the arches distribute weight, the way the walls rise in careful courses, the way every brick and every bucket of concrete has a purpose and a structure that will still be standing when everyone here is dust. There is a kind of beauty in it, an order that satisfies something in him that he did not know was hungry. One afternoon, perhaps 3 weeks into his work, Marin is sent to carry materials to a different part of the site, a room in an adjacent building that is being finished rather than built. He steps through a doorway and stops. The room is not large, the walls are plastered smooth and white, and on the far wall a man is working. He is kneeling on a low platform, and before him the wall is covered in a layer of fresh, damp plaster, and he is painting. Not painting the way Marin has seen walls painted. The simple red and ochre borders that mark off sections, the geometric patterns that any trained hand can reproduce. This man is painting a face. A woman's face, emerging from the wet plaster in strokes of earth, red and yellow ochre, and a blue so vivid it seems to glow. The woman is a goddess, Diana perhaps, or Venus, and she is looking out from the wall with an expression of such calm attention that Marin feels absurdly as though she is looking at him. The painter does not notice Marin. He is working fast, the plaster will dry, and what is not painted before it sets must be chipped away and redone, and his focus is absolute. His brushes are fine, made of animal hair bound to wooden handles, and the pigments beside him are arranged in small clay dishes, reds and yellows ground from iron-rich earth, green from malachite, that impossible blue from a mineral Marin has never seen. The painter's hands move with a certainty that reminds Marin, strangely, of Thessala's hands on the day he watched her mixing herbs at her work table in the courtyard. The same unhesitating precision, the same knowledge that lives in the body rather than the mind. Someone calls Marin's name. He turns. He picks up the materials he was sent for and carries them back to his section. He returns to hauling bricks. But something has shifted. A door has opened in his mind. Just a crack, just enough to let a sliver of light through. And though he could not tell you what it means, he finds himself thinking about that blue. Where does it come from? How does a man learn to make a face appear on a wall? What kind of life is that, to spend your days making beautiful things, permanent things, things that people will look at long after you are gone. He does not say any of this to anyone. He is not the kind of person who voices half-formed thoughts, but the question is there now, quiet and patient, waiting for him to find his way toward it. There is a sound that belongs to the fooleries of Rome, and once you have heard it, you do not forget it. It is the sound of feet, bare feet, rhythmic and relentless, stamping in shallow stone vats filled with cloth and water, and the sharp chemical mixture that strips dirt and grease from wool. The fullers call this the saltus pholonicus, the fuller's dance, and the men and women who perform it do so for hours, treading the wet fabric with their legs burning and their feet wrinkled and pale from the solution. The solution itself is made primarily from aged human urine, collected in large clay pots placed at street corners throughout the city for this purpose, a fact that visitors to Rome find remarkable, but which Romans accept with the same practicality they bring to aqueducts and sewers. The empire runs on systems, and the fulling of cloth is one of them. Fortunata works here. She is 31 years old, freeborn, the daughter of a laundress who worked in a different foolery on the other side of the Esquiline. She has done this work since she was old enough to stand in the vats, and her body carries the evidence. Her hands are rough and reddened, her feet calloused thick, and there is a particular strength in her legs that comes from years of the stamping work. She is not unhappy. The foolery has a rhythm to it, a community, a dark humor shared among the workers that makes the days bearable. The women she works with are her people, and there is a solidarity in shared discomfort that bonds as surely as shared pleasure. But Fortunata is also tired in a way that goes deeper than the day's labor. She is tired the way a person is tired when they can see the shape of their whole life laid out in front of them, and it looks exactly like today. The same vats, the same burning feet, the same walk home. She is not ambitious. Ambition is a luxury that belongs to people with choices, but she has, somewhere beneath the tiredness, a flicker of something that might be called hunger. Not for food, for something she cannot name. Something different, something that surprises her. In the late afternoon, when the day's work is done and the cloth is hanging on frames in the courtyard to dry and bleach in the last of the sun, Fortunata walks to the fountain. Every neighborhood has one. Rome's aqueducts feed hundreds of public fountains throughout the city, and the water runs constantly, clean and cold, piped from the hills outside the city through channels of stone and lead. The fountain nearest the crossroads is a simple stone basin set against a wall with a bronze spout shaped like a lion's mouth from which the water pours in a steady, glittering stream. Fortunata stands at the basin and washes her arms to the elbow, letting the cold water run over the redness and the chemical sting, and for a moment she closes her eyes, and the water is the only thing in the world. Then she goes to Serapia's. The thermopolium in the evening is a different place than it is at dawn. The counter is crowded. Laborers, shopkeepers, a few of the women from the foolery, an old man who seems to live at the corner of the counter, and who Serapia tolerates with a patience that suggests long acquaintance. The pots hold different food now, a thick chickpea stew, roasted turnips, sausages dark with pepper and cumin. The wine is flowing more freely. The conversation is louder. And the lamplight, as the sky darkens, gives the whole scene a warmth that softens the rough edges of the street and the buildings and the people themselves. Thessala is here. She sits at the end of the counter, eating slowly, and when Fortunata arrives, something small happens, a recognition, a nod, a slight shifting to make room. They have seen each other here before, many times, but tonight Fortunata sits beside Thessala rather than with the other Fullery women, and neither of them comments on this. They eat. After a while, they talk, small things, the heat, the price of bread, a rumor about a building collapse on the Aventine. Fortunata asks about an ache in her wrist, and Thessala examines it with her quick, careful fingers, and tells her it is strain, not injury, and recommends a compress of vinegar and crushed comfrey root. Fortunata laughs and says she can barely afford the vinegar. Thessala does not laugh, but something in her face warms. It is the beginning, not of anything dramatic, just of two women discovering that they enjoy each other's company in a way that is different from the companionship of work or the familiarity of neighbors. Thessala, who is always the one consulted, finds herself in a conversation where she is not needed, but wanted, and the difference is so subtle she does not register it consciously. Fortunata, who spends her days among women who share her circumstances, finds herself sitting with someone whose life is different from hers, quieter, more solitary, more self-contained, and she is curious about it. They do not become instant friends. They become two people who, when they arrive at Serapia's counter in the evening, look for each other. And Marin is there too, a few places down the counter, eating his stew and listening to the conversations around him with the attentiveness of someone still learning the rhythms of a new place. He does not speak to Fortunata. He barely notices her, and she does not notice him. They are simply two people in the same small crowd at the same counter on the same warm evening in a city of 1,000,000 souls where every connection that will ever matter begins exactly like this, with proximity and time and the slow accumulation of presence. Autumn has come to Rome. The brutal heat of summer is broken, and the air has a quality that Romans wait for all year, warm but not punishing, with a clarity that makes the city's marble and travertine shine in the afternoon light. The sky is a deeper blue, the light is longer and more golden, slanting through the streets at angles that turn ordinary walls into something luminous. In the markets, the stalls are heavy with the autumn harvest, grapes and figs and quinces, mushrooms from the hills, chestnuts roasting in iron pans over charcoal, and everywhere the new wine, rough and cloudy and sweet, not yet aged, poured from clay jugs still stained with the must. And in the neighborhood at the crossroads, preparations are underway for the Compitalia. The Compitalia is the festival of the Lares Compitales, the guardian spirits of the crossroads, the same figures painted in the little shrine that Serapia tends each morning. It is one of the oldest festivals in Rome, older than the Empire, older than the Republic, rooted in a time when the crossroads were considered liminal places, thresholds between one world and another. In the grand temples and public spaces of the city, religion is a matter of state. Elaborate rituals performed by priests in white robes, sacrifices of bulls and incense, processions through the forum watched by thousands. But here, in the neighborhoods, religion is something smaller and more intimate. It belongs to the people who live on the street. It is tended by their hands. Serapia has been preparing for days. She has cleaned and repainted the shrine. The two lyres are bright now, their colors fresh, their small faces smiling in the way that the old gods smile, which is not quite like the way people smile. She has woven garlands of ivy and late-blooming flowers and hung them around the alcove. She has baked small honey cakes in the shapes of figures, one for each household on the street, and arranged them on a tray beside a jug of wine for the offering. The neighborhood has contributed. Lucius has donated a piece of fine leather, cut and stamped with a pattern of leaves, to hang beside the shrine. The baker on the next street has provided extra loaves. An old soldier who lives on the second floor of the insula has polished the small bronze incense burner that belongs to the shrine, and that only comes out for this occasion. As the afternoon light turns gold, the neighbors gather. It is not a large crowd, perhaps 30 or 40 people, but it is the neighborhood entire, and that makes it feel vast. Lucius is there, standing near his shop door with Decimus beside him. Marin stands near the back, uncertain of his place but drawn by the warmth and the music. Someone has brought a small flute and someone else a hand drum, and the melody they make together is simple and old and strangely moving. Thessala is there, helping Serapia arrange the offerings. Fortunata arrives with 2 of the women from the fullery, her hair still damp from washing, and she positions herself near the fountain where she can see. Serapia leads the ceremony, such as it is. There are no priests here, no officials. She simply stands before the shrine and speaks. Not a formal prayer, but something more like a conversation with the guardian spirits, a report on the state of the neighborhood, a request for continued protection, a remembrance of those who have died or moved away since the last festival. She names them, she speaks each name clearly, and the neighbors hear them, and for a moment the absent are present again. Then she pours the wine, lights the incense, and places the honey cakes at the feet of the Lares, and the sweet smoke rises into the evening air and mingles with the smell of the garlands and the food, and the little shrine, for this one evening, is the center of the world. After the formal offering, the festival becomes a gathering. Food appears, each household has brought something, and the wine circulates, and the flute player and the drummer are joined by a woman with a clear voice who sings a song that some of the older neighbors know and join in on, their voices rough and warm. Children chase each other between the adults' legs. The old soldier tells a story about a compitalia he attended in Moesia on the Danube frontier, where the snow was knee-deep and the offerings froze solid. People laugh. Lucius and Decimus stand together near the edge of the gathering. They share a cup of wine. They do not talk about the departure. It is too close now, too real, and to speak of it would be to make it more present than either of them wants it to be tonight. Instead, Decimus tells his father about a ship he saw at the docks, a grain freighter from Alexandria, massive, with a prow carved into the shape of a swan, and Lucius listens and asks questions, and if his questions are a way of memorizing his son's voice for the months ahead, neither of them says so. Across the gathering, Marin is standing alone, watching. He has been in the neighborhood for nearly 2 months now, and he is no longer a stranger. People nod to him. Serapia greets him by name. Lucius has repaired a strap on his work sandal and refused payment, but he is not yet part of the fabric. He is still the one who stands at the edge and observes. And tonight, observing, he sees something that moves him, a neighborhood of people who are not related, who come from different places and speak with different accents and worship in different ways, but who stand together at a crossroads shrine and share food and name their dead and for one evening are a family. It is Fortunata who speaks to him. She appears beside him with a cup of wine. She has brought him one without being asked, a small gesture of inclusion that is entirely natural and entirely deliberate. And she says something about the music, or the food, or the fact that he looks like a man who could use a drink. He takes the cup. They stand together and watch the gathering, and after a while they talk. She asks where he is from. He tells her. She asks if they have festivals like this in Colonia. He says they do, but the wine is worse and the weather is colder, and she laughs, a real laugh, easy and unself-conscious. And he finds himself smiling in a way he has not smiled since he arrived in this city. They do not talk for long. The gathering is winding down. The lamps are being lit. People are drifting home. But when Fortunata says good night and walks away with the foolery women, Marin stands at the crossroads for a moment longer, holding the empty cup she gave him, and the evening is warmer than it was an hour ago. Winter does not come to Rome the way it comes to Colonia. There is no snow, or almost never. The Tiber does not freeze. But the air turns sharp, and the rain comes, heavy, persistent rain that turns the unpaved streets to mud and sends rivulets coursing down the stone gutters, and makes the upper floors of the insulae damp and cold in a way that seeps into the bones. People wear heavier cloaks and crowd closer to the braziers in their rooms, and the thermopolium does brisker business than ever, because a hot bowl of Serapia's stew is worth more on a cold, wet evening than almost anything else in the world. It is December when Decimus leaves. The morning is gray and cool, and Lucius wakes before dawn, as he always does, and lies in the dark, listening to his son's breathing from the other side of the room. He has been listening to this sound for 23 years. The soft rhythm of it, the slight catch on the inhale that Decimus has had since childhood, is as familiar to Lucius as the sound of his own heartbeat. After today, the room will breathe differently. They rise. They eat bread and cheese in the shop by lamplight, not saying much. The traveling boots are ready, have been ready for weeks, and Decimus puts them on, lacing them carefully, testing the fit. They are perfect. Lucius knew they would be. He built them to the exact shape of his son's feet, a shape he has known since it fit in the palm of his hand. Decimus's things are packed into a leather bag, a change of clothes, a cloak, his documents, a small amount of money, the letter of introduction from the merchant company. It is not much. A life reduced to what a man can carry, which is how most journeys begin. They walk together to the edge of the neighborhood, to the point where the street meets a larger road that leads north toward the Via Flaminia, where Decimus will join a merchant caravan heading east. The morning is brightening, but the sun has not yet broken through the clouds. Serapia is standing at her counter, and as they pass she steps out and presses something into Decimus's hand, a small honey cake, the kind she makes for the shrine. "For the road," she says. He takes it and he thanks her, and his voice is steady but his eyes are not. At the corner they stop. The larger road is busy. Carts, travelers, a military patrol moving in formation, and Decimus will disappear into this current and be carried away by it, one more figure in the endless movement of the empire. Lucius looks at his son. There are things he wants to say. Be careful, be wise, do not trust too easily, eat well, write to me, come home. But what comes out is simpler. He places his hand on Decimus's shoulder and holds it there. He tells him the boots will need re-oiling in a month, and that the left sole may wear unevenly, and that if the stitching loosens on the ankle, he should find a cobbler who knows the double thread method and not let anyone use a single stitch, because it will not hold on the road. He is talking about boots. He is not talking about boots. Decimus nods. He knows. He puts his arms around his father briefly and tightly, in the way of young men who love deeply and show it poorly, and then he turns and walks into the road. Lucius watches until the crowd takes him. Then he stands for a moment longer, because the spot where his son was standing still feels occupied, the air still shaped by his presence. Then he turns and walks back to the shop, and he opens the shutters and he begins to work. The days after are quiet in a way that has texture and weight. The shop is the same. The tools are the same. The work comes in, a merchant's boots, a lady's sandals sent by her slave, a child's first pair of shoes that the father orders with a pride that Lucius recognizes like a mirror held up to his own past. He does the work. He does it well. But the room above the shop is too large now, and the mornings are too silent, and he catches himself turning to say something to a person who is not there. The neighborhood holds him. This is what neighborhoods do if they are good ones, and this one is. Serapia sends food, not with any ceremony, just a boy appearing at the shop door with a covered bowl and a curt message, "Eat this, it's getting cold." Thessalia stops by more often than before, always with a reason, a sandal that needs mending, a question about a leather she wants for a carrying case, and she stays a little longer each time, sitting on the stool by the workbench while Lucius works, and they talk about nothing in particular, which is the most sustaining kind of conversation there is. Even Marin, who barely knows Lucius, develops a habit of nodding to him each morning on the way to work, and the nod becomes a word, and the word becomes a brief exchange. And one evening, Marin asks Lucius about the leather he uses for soles, and Lucius, grateful for the question, talks for 20 minutes about the properties of different hides, and neither of them mentions that this is kindness disguised as curiosity. Lucius does not collapse. He does not despair. He simply endures the particular ache of a parent who has done his job well enough that his child no longer needs him in the same way, and he discovers, slowly, over the course of many gray winter days, that the life he built here, the shop and the street and the neighbors and the work, is not the backdrop to his relationship with Decimus. It is a life of its own. It has been all along. The winter rains have eased, and the construction sites are busy again. The new year has brought a new project for Publius Varro's crew, the renovation of a bathhouse on the lower slope of the Esquiline, not a grand public facility, but a neighborhood balneum, modest in size and ambitious in its owner's aspirations. The man who owns the bathhouse wants mosaics, not the simple geometric patterns that most small baths employ. He wants figures. He wants a sea scene, dolphins, fish, the god Neptune, waves rendered in blue and green and white. He has hired a mosaic workshop to do the work, and Varro's crew has been contracted to prepare the rooms, leveling floors, plastering walls, mixing and laying the setting bed of morite into which the tesserae will be pressed. This is how Marin finds himself one morning in late February, kneeling on the floor of a half-finished room, smoothing a layer of fine lime mortar with a wooden float, while 3 feet away a man named Cassius begins to lay a mosaic. Cassius is the workshop's tessellarius, the craftsman who sets the tesserae into the mortar according to the design. He is a quiet man in his 40s, originally from Antioch, and he works with a focus so complete that the room seems to contract around him, the noise of the construction site fading to nothing. Before him, on a wooden board propped against the wall, is the design, a painted guide showing the pattern of the sea floor, the sinuous shapes of dolphins mid-leap, the border of geometric waves. And beside him, arranged in shallow wooden trays, are the tesserae themselves. Marin has never seen anything like them. They are tiny, no larger than the nail of his little finger, and they are made of everything: cubes of white limestone and gray marble, pieces of terracotta in shades of red and orange, fragments of colored glass paste, translucent and jewel-bright, blues that range from the deep indigo of a twilight sky to the pale turquoise of shallow water, greens like summer leaves, yellows like lamp flame, and here and there pieces of a material Marin does not recognize, a vivid, almost unnatural blue that seems to hold light within itself. This is Egyptian blue, Cassius tells him later, when they break for water. It is made from sand and copper and natron, heated together until they fuse into something that is neither stone nor glass, but something else entirely. The Egyptians discovered it thousands of years ago. A few workshops in Rome still know how to make it. It is expensive and irreplaceable, and there is nothing else in the world that color. Marin smooths his mortar and watches Cassius work. The tessellarius picks up each tiny cube with a pair of iron tweezers, dips it lightly in a thin slurry of lime, and presses it into the setting bed with a precision that is almost musical. Each piece placed in a fraction of a second, each one exactly where it needs to be, the gaps between them barely wider than a hair. The pattern grows outward from the center like a living thing, the dolphins taking shape cube by cube, their bodies curving through a sea that is somehow, impossibly, made of stone and yet looks like water. The illusion works only at a distance. Up close, it is just fragments, just chips of color pressed into morite. But when Marin stands and steps back to the doorway, the floor becomes a window onto another world, a sunlit sea alive with movement. He begins to find reasons to be in the room. Varro assigns him to the bathhouse project full-time. It needs someone reliable for the finish work, and Marin has proved himself careful, and so he is there each day, preparing surfaces, mixing mortar, carrying materials for Cassius and the two younger assistants who cut the tesserae. He learns the names of things, the emblemata, the central figured panels that are the showcase of any mosaic, the opus tessellatum, the broader background work of simple, regular cubes, the difference between limestone and marble, between glass paste and natural stone, between the setting bed that must be soft enough to receive the tesserae and firm enough to hold them forever. He asks questions, not many, and not all at once. Marin is constitutionally incapable of pestering, but enough that Cassius begins to notice him. The tessellarius is accustomed to laborers who have no interest in his craft, who see the tesserae as just another material to be hauled and placed. Marin is different. He picks up the pieces and turns them in his fingers. He asks about the colors. Where do they come from? How are they made? Why does this green fade and that one hold? And one afternoon, when the assistants are busy and Cassius needs someone to cut tesserae from a sheet of limestone, he hands Marin the hammer and the hardy, the small chisel set into an iron block, and shows him how to strike. The first cuts are clumsy. The stone fractures unevenly, producing shapes that are too large, too irregular, useless. Marin adjusts. He watches Cassius demonstrate again the angle of the hammer, the point of contact, the way the stone wants to break along its grain if you listen to it, and he tries again. Better, again, better still. By the end of the afternoon, he has produced a small pile of tesserae that are imperfect but usable, and Cassius nods, a single nod, the kind a craftsman gives when a thing meets the minimum standard of acceptability. And Marin feels something rise in his chest that he will not recognize until much later as the beginning of a vocation. In the evenings he goes to Serapia's. The habit is fixed now. It is the place he goes, the place everyone goes, and the counter in the lamplight has become as familiar to him as the workshop floor. Fortunata is usually there. Their conversations have grown longer over the weeks and easier, and have developed the particular quality of conversations between two people who are beginning to know each other well enough to be comfortable with silence. They talk about their days. Fortunata describes the foolery with a dry humor that makes the grim work vivid and funny. Marin tells her about the mosaics, haltingly at first, because he is not good with words, but with a growing enthusiasm that surprises him. He finds himself describing the colors to her, trying to make her see what he sees, and she listens with an attention that is different from politeness. She is interested, not in mosaics particularly, but in the way he talks about them, the way his voice changes, the way his hands move, the way the careful, guarded young man she has come to know becomes, for a few minutes, someone animated by wonder. One evening he brings her something. It is a tessera, a single cube of the Egyptian blue, flawed, rejected from the work because of a hairline crack that makes it unsuitable for the mosaic but does not diminish its beauty. He has been carrying it in his hand all the way from the site, and he places it on the counter beside her bowl without explanation or ceremony. She picks it up. She holds it to the lamplight. In the warm glow, the blue is extraordinary, deep and luminous, the color of a thing that should not exist in nature, and does only because someone, centuries ago, learned how to make it. She looks at him. He looks at the counter. She closes her fingers around the blue stone and puts it in the fold of her belt, and she says something about the stew being good tonight, and Marin agrees that it is. And Serapia, who has seen everything from her side of the counter, says nothing at all but allows herself the smallest of expressions, which on anyone else would be called a smile. Spring comes to Rome the way it comes to all Mediterranean cities, not gradually, but in a rush, as if the season has been waiting behind a door and someone has finally opened it. One morning the air is different, the dampness is gone, the sky is a blue so clean it looks new, and the sun, which has spent months hidden behind clouds and rain, falls on the city with a warmth that makes the old stones glow and the puddles in the streets flash like mirrors. The plane trees along the wider avenues have put out new leaves, pale green and translucent, and the smell of the city has changed. Less smoke and damp wool, more dust and green things, and the faint sweetness of blossoms from the gardens on the Palatine. In the neighborhood at the crossroads, the change is felt in small ways. Serapia has moved her brazier to the back of the thermopolium and opened the counter wider to the street, and the evening gatherings have spilled outward, people standing and sitting in the street itself in the long, warm dusk. Lucius works with his shop door open and the light falling across his bench, and the leather scraps smell different in the warmth, richer, almost sweet. The fountain at the corner runs cold and clear, and children come to drink from it and splash each other and run away shrieking. And Thessala has planted a garden. It is not much of a garden. Her third-floor room has a narrow ledge outside the window, barely wide enough for a row of pots, and she has placed clay vessels there, filled with soil bought for a few coins from a man who carts garden earth in from the countryside. She has planted thyme, which she uses in her work. She has planted chamomile, which she uses for teas and compresses. But she has also planted something else, a cutting of jasmine given to her by Fortunata, who got it from the courtyard of the foolery owner's house, where it grows wild along the wall. Jasmine has no medicinal use that Thessala knows of. It is not practical. It is not useful. She planted it because she likes the way it smells. This is a small thing, and Thessala does not make anything of it. She waters the pots each morning and moves on to her work, but something has shifted in her over these months, something so gradual that it would be impossible to point to the moment it changed. Her friendship with Fortunata has been part of it. The experience of being known not as a healer, not as the capable one, not as the woman you send for when something goes wrong, but simply as Thessala, the woman who has opinions about wine, who finds a particular vendor in the market amusing, who once, on a walk with Fortunata through the Forum, stopped before a statue of Athena and stood looking at it for so long that Fortunata asked what she was thinking, and Thessala said, without planning to say it, that she had always wanted to see Greece, not Thessaloniki, where she was born. Greece itself, Athens and Delphi, and the mountains she had heard about since childhood but never seen. She had not known she wanted this until she said it. That is how it works sometimes. The wanting does not arrive like a guest at the door. It surfaces like something that was always there, buried under years of competence and duty and the quiet pride of being needed. Thessala is still the midwife. She is still the one Prisca sends for, the one the neighbors trust, the one whose hands know things that no book could teach. But she has begun to suspect, gently, without alarm, that she is also someone else, someone she has not yet fully met. The jasmine will bloom in summer, and its scent will drift through her window while she sleeps, and it will smell like nothing but itself, purposeless and beautiful, and that will be enough. Fortunata, too, has changed, though in a way that is harder to see from the outside. She still works at the foolery, her feet still burn, her hands are still rough, but she moves through her days differently now, with a kind of attention that was not there before, as if the world has come into slightly sharper focus. The friendship with Thessala has given her something she did not have a language for, a sense that her life, which she had thought of as simply endured, is also observed. Someone sees her, someone finds her interesting. This should not feel as revolutionary as it does, but it does. And Marin. On a morning in early April, Marin arrives at the bathhouse site, and Cassius tells him without preamble that if he wants to continue learning the mosaic work properly, there is a place for him as an apprentice in the workshop. The pay is less than construction labor. The work is slower, more demanding, and requires years of training before it produces anything like mastery. It is not the practical choice. It is not what Marin came to Rome to do. He says yes. He says yes because he has learned something about himself over these months that he could not have learned in Colonia, because in Colonia there were no mosaic workshops and no dolphins made of stone and no Egyptian blue. He has learned that the restlessness that drove him south, the feeling that the life in front of him was too small, was not restlessness at all. It was a hunger for something specific, something his hands and his eyes were made for, and he simply had not found it yet. He did not come to Rome to become a mosaic artist. He came to Rome because Rome was the place where he could discover that this is what he was. This is not the end of his journey. It is barely the beginning. He will spend years cutting tesserae before he is trusted with the simplest pattern. He will make mistakes and waste materials and earn Cassius's silence, which is worse than his criticism. But he will also kneel on a floor one day and set a line of blue-green glass into a dolphin's eye and feel the click of something fitting into place, not the tessera in the mortar, but himself in his life. And that will be worth all of it. On a warm evening in April, a letter arrives for Lucius. It comes by way of a merchant who has traveled from Ephesus and who was given the letter by another merchant who received it from Decimus himself in Antioch 3 months ago. The chain of hands that carried it across the empire is itself a kind of miracle, a small folded sheet of papyrus sealed with wax, passing from palm to palm across 1,000 miles of road and sea, finding its way to a cobbler's shop on an unremarkable street in Rome because someone at each link in the chain thought it worth carrying. Lucius opens it in the shop in the late afternoon light. The handwriting is Decimus's. He can see his son's hand in the quick, slightly uneven letters, the way the lines slope upward as if the words are eager to get somewhere. The letter is not long. Decimus writes that he has arrived safely in Antioch. The journey was long, but the weather held. The merchant company is larger than he expected, and the work is good. He has seen the sea, not the harbor at Ostia, which he saw as a boy, but the open sea from the deck of a ship, and it was bigger than he could have imagined. He has eaten foods he has no Latin words for. He is learning some Greek. He is well. At the end, almost as an afterthought, Decimus writes, "The boots held up." Lucius reads the letter twice. He folds it carefully and places it on the shelf beside his tools, between a jar of leather dye and a spool of linen thread. Then he sits for a moment in the quiet shop with the light falling through the doorway and the sound of the street outside, and he feels something that has been clenched inside him for months begin, finally, to open. His son is in the world. The world is vast and strange and full of seas that are bigger than imagining, and his son is in it, and he is well. The boots held up. Lucius picks up his tools. He has work to do. A woman has brought in a pair of children's sandals, outgrown and handed down to a smaller sibling, and they need new straps and a fresh sole. It is ordinary work. It is the best kind of work. He begins. And now the evening comes. Let us visit the neighborhood one last time in the long golden light of a spring evening when the shadows stretch across the street and the air is warm and still, and the city, which has been so loud and so alive all day, begins to soften. Serapia is closing the thermopolium. She scrapes the last of the stew from the pots and covers them. She wipes the stone counter with a cloth, the way she has done every evening for 30 years, the same slow circular motion that has worn a faint groove into the surface of the stone. The groove is there if you look for it, a shallow curve polished smooth by 10,000 evenings of this same gesture. And it is, in its way, as much a monument as anything in the Forum. She banks the fire, she checks the shrine. The lamp is burning, the garland is fresh, the lares smile their ancient smile. She stands for a moment at the counter, looking out at the street, and the light catches her face, and she is not old, not young, but simply herself. A woman who has been here a long time and who will be here tomorrow and who holds the memory of this place in her body the way the stones hold the heat of the day. Lucius locks his shop. He has finished the children's sandals and they sit on the bench, neat and small, waiting for their owner. Decimus's letter is on the shelf. The room above the shop is quiet, but it is no longer an empty quiet. It is the quiet of a place that is simply at rest, a room that belongs to a man who has work and neighbors, and a shelf full of letters that will grow over the years, a life that continues. Thessala is in her rooms. The window is open, and the evening air moves through it, carrying the scent of the neighborhood, bread and charcoal, and the mineral smell of the fountain, and faintly the green scent of her garden on the ledge. The jasmine has not bloomed yet. It is still just a small green stem with leaves, reaching toward the light, taking its time. She sits by the window and does nothing. She does not mix herbs. She does not organize her shelves. She simply sits, and the evening is around her, and she is in it, not waiting for someone to need her, not preparing for tomorrow's work, but here, simply here. And if this seems like a small thing, it is only because the most important changes are always small. A garden planted for no reason, a friendship that made room for something unnamed, a woman sitting at a window at the end of a day, discovering that she is not just useful, she is alive. Down in the street, two people are walking. Marin and Fortunata have left Serapia's counter and are moving in the same direction, toward the insula, because they both live there on different floors, which is a fact they have both been aware of for months and which neither of them has ever made anything of. They are not walking together, exactly. They are walking in the same direction at the same time, close enough that their shoulders occasionally almost touch, and they are talking about nothing. The food tonight, the sound the fountain makes when the pressure changes, a cat that has taken up residence in the alley behind the foolery. Small things, the currency of two people who are not yet sure what they are to each other but who are in no hurry to find out. At the door of the insula, they stop. The street is quieter now. The last of the vendors have packed up. Somewhere above them, a shutter closes. The lamp at the crossroads shrine throws a warm circle of light that just reaches the doorway where they stand. Fortunata reaches into the fold of her belt and produces something, a small object that catches the lamplight. It is the tessera, the piece of Egyptian blue that Marin gave her weeks ago, cracked and imperfect, and the color of the deepest part of the sky just after the sun has gone. She has been carrying it. She holds it up, not to show it to him, but to see it in this particular light, and the blue glows in her fingers like a tiny captured fragment of the evening itself. She does not say anything about what it means. He does not ask. They stand in the doorway in the warm evening, and the silence between them is not empty. It is full, the way a held breath is full, the way the pause before a song begins is full of the music that is about to come. Fortunata says good night. Marin says good night. She goes inside and he hears her footsteps on the stairs. second floor, third floor, fourth, and then the door of her room closing softly above him. He stands in the doorway a moment longer. The crossroads lamp flickers. The street is still. He goes inside, and now the neighborhood sleeps. The shops are shuttered, the counters closed, the fires banked to embers that will glow through the night and be ready for morning. In her rooms on the third floor, Thessalia sleeps with the window open and the barely there scent of green things drifting in. In his shop, Lucius sleeps in the room that was once too empty and is now simply his, and on the shelf beside him a letter from a distant city rests between a jar of dye and a spool of thread. In her rooms behind the thermopolium, Serapia sleeps the deep, earned sleep of a woman who has tended her corner of the world for another day. And on the fourth floor, Marin lies on his narrow bed and looks at the ceiling and thinks of blue, the blue of stone, the blue of the evening, the blue of something just beginning, and his eyes close. Outside, the city breathes. The great aqueducts pour their water into the reservoirs and the fountains, and the sound of running water is everywhere, gentle and constant, the pulse of the city that never stops. The streets are quiet now, or as quiet as Rome ever gets, which is to say there are still sounds, distant sounds, the murmur of a city of 1,000,000 souls settling into the night. A dog barks on the Aventine, and another answers from the Calian hill. A night watchman makes his rounds, his lantern swinging, his footsteps steady. The delivery carts will come again before dawn, carrying tomorrow's bread and wine, but for now the streets belong to the dark and the stars, and at the crossroads the little lamp still burns. The lairs smile. The garland of flowers moves slightly in a breeze, so faint it barely exists. The neighborhood is safe. The neighborhood is home. The neighborhood will be here in the morning, when Serapia opens her door and lights the fire, and the whole beautiful, ordinary business of living begins again. But that is tomorrow. Tonight the city rests. And you, who have walked these streets, and sat at this counter and watched these lives unfold, you have been here long enough. The story continues without you, as all good stories do. The characters go on, Lucius in his shop, Thessalia at her window, Marin learning the patience of stone, Fortunata carrying a piece of blue in the fold of her belt, Serapia tending the flame. They go on, and they are well. Let them go. Let the street grow quiet. Let the lamplight soften and the sounds fade and the warm night settle around you like a blanket drawn gently up. The crossroad sleeps, the city sleeps, the world turns slowly toward morning. But morning is far away, and there is nothing you need to do, nowhere you need to be, nothing that cannot wait.